Okay, we are live. So, hi everyone, whoever is from wherever you are joining this session, welcome to this international immersion session. Along with me, I have Patrick. As you can see, he is always very bright presence wherever he is with his wonderful smile. Fortunately, we got an opportunity to interact during his stay at Ahmedabad, and he was on an exchange program from Georgetown University. He went into a public policy domain, and throughout, I would say he has interest in the education sector, something which has in all parts, wherever we see, whether it is in the context of India, US, Europe, education has a very transformative experience. And his primary focus has been on the marginalized section of the society, even in US, and those who are economically are deprived, not do not have too many economic resources to go to the best of the places. So his foundation, through which he supports, he had been with Teach for India for more than 7 years. Then he and his partner had a stint in Mexico for more than 2 years, and now again he's back to States. So Patrick, thank you very much for joining from San Francisco. It's 8 o'clock in India, and I think it's late afternoon from there. But thank you taking out time from your busy schedule.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's amazing to see you because it has been so long since we saw each other at IIM Ahmedabad. And I'm excited to talk. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, going forward, what was your motivation to choose education as a sector of interest? People go into varied, and given your education, academic experiences, you could have gone into a very typical corporate kind of a role.
Mhm.
So, what led you to choose education as a sector?
Sure. When I was in college, I was volunteering at a boys and girls club, so a community organization in Boston. I went to college in Boston. And I got to work with kids, mostly kids who were 10, 11, 12 years old. We would, I'd play sports with them. I would, you know, tutor them and help them with their homework. And I remember a lot of the students that I worked with at that Boys and Girls Club were from low income backgrounds. Their families didn't have a lot of economic resources. And I just remember this moment one day where I was tutoring one of my students, and they were in the sixth grade, and I just remember seeing academically they were so much further behind academically than I was when I was in the sixth grade growing up. Um, and it started to open my eyes to the fact that not everyone has the same access to educational opportunity, and especially in the United States, if you are from a low income background, and then in many cases if you are Latino or Black, if you are a student of color, you don't have access to the same opportunities. And I just remember thinking that that was so unfair. And so then I started thinking about, okay, well then what do I want to do about it? And so I discovered Teach for America, the nonprofit organization that recruits college students to become teachers in low income communities across the United States. And I thought, you know, that's what I want to do. And it gave me this amazing opportunity right after college to step into a classroom and have an impact on this issue that I became really passionate about.
Okay, great. So, how was your experience with Teach for America? You were there for more than 7 years. What all activities you got involved yourself into, and what was the impact which you could see in the target segment?
Yeah. So I did a number of different things at Teach for America over the years. So, first I was a teacher. So I moved to Los Angeles and I taught seventh and eighth grade. So this was middle school in the United States. And that was just a transformative experience for me. I got to meet amazing students. I got to build relationships with their families. And I was teaching in a community that again was very under resourced. I was in a school that overall was not a high performing school, and I remember thinking that my students were getting a raw deal. Like they weren't getting access to an excellent education. But what I saw in teaching there for several years, both in my classroom, but also I saw in several other teachers' classrooms, that if you put a great teacher in the classroom in front of students, students are gonna excel no matter what their educational background or experience is. And I saw that to be true for my students. I saw my students make massive academic progress, and that was just, it was like a proof point to me. I was like, okay, here we have this system in the United States where typically low income students um, are not performing well in school compared to their higher income peers. Yet I'm seeing something so different right in front of me in my classroom. And so for me, that just showed me that this problem, this like the inequity that exists in education, in fact, like doesn't have to exist. And so for me, that was just this moment, because I didn't plan on being in education for my whole career. I wanted to be a teacher at least for several years. But that experience made me just really fired up and said, okay, this is what I'm going to spend my career doing, is focused on education. And so that was the first thing that I did at Teach for America. I was a teacher, but then I became a staff member at the organization, and I did a number of different things. From I would go to college campuses and I would recruit college students to become Teach for America teachers. That was one of the roles that I had, and I loved that work. I think though the other role that I had that was really profound for me, that kind of shaped my perspective and worldview, was I moved. This was actually after my time in Ahmedabad. I moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, so in the Midwest, right in the middle of the United States. And I was the executive director of Teach for America's Indianapolis region. And so in that role, I would look at the education system in Indianapolis. And in Indianapolis, there were about 85 schools that served predominantly students from low income backgrounds. And my role was to look at those 85 schools and say, okay, what would it take for all of these schools to be excellent schools? And what is the role of Teach for America in making that happen, specifically from a talent perspective? So what role could Teach for America play to recruit and train really talented teachers, to recruit and train principals of schools, to help Teach for America alumni go into policy, and so that they were sitting on the school boards and making policy decisions for schools? So like, what's the talent pipeline in education, and how can that fuel change in the city? And I loved that job. And I think most importantly, what it did for me is I saw then a whole school system over time start to operate differently. So I saw great teachers in classrooms doing like amazing things with students, but then I also saw whole schools do incredible work for students. I saw change happen at the policy level, and it was because of not just folks who came through Teach for America, but also other like really talented people throughout the district, working together in pursuit of excellence and equity for all students. And so that just gave me this perspective again, that the problems that exist within education that are really systemic challenges are really tough problems to solve, but they're solvable. And because I saw change start to happen at a system level across the city. So that was, I think, also one of my more profound experiences at Teach for America.
Okay, great. So you have been a teacher for students from low income group, and also involved in hiring teachers in your role as executive director for Indianapolis region. What are the couple of traits which you could, but yeah, of course, good
Mm.
teachers, great teachers are very short in supply. So what are the methodologies which you utilize in terms of maybe, let's say, hiring even average level teacher, and then maybe sensitizing them, or maybe equipping
Mm.
them with something so that they become good teachers and maybe
Yeah.
subsequently great teachers? What what were the strategies which you utilized? What were the observation which you had from your practical experiences?
Yeah. So I love hiring just in general, whether it's to hire teachers or even, people on my team now in my role at Making Waves Education Foundation. Um, uh, I feel like it's something that I've just learned a lot about over the time. And honestly, I feel like the things that I look for when I'm hiring someone at the chief level on a role and in my on my team is often the same skills that I'm looking for when I'm looking to hire a great teacher too. I think the skills in some ways are universal and transferable across sectors, but I'll name a couple of the things that I think have stood out to me over the years. um, the first is, and just I don't know, it's just so fundamental, is just uh, a deep belief in students and the potential of all students. I think, if someone is going to be a teacher in any classroom, but in the context of Teach for America, if someone is going to be a teacher in a classroom supporting students from low income backgrounds, supporting students of color, they have to believe that their students can achieve at the highest level, regardless of the obstacles that they are facing. Because then when they get in the classroom, their kids are going to come with all kinds of challenges or might not have had the same educational opportunities, but they're going to have to hold a really high bar and believe like, yeah, my kids can achieve. And so that like mindset is number one. I think another thing that I look for is, regardless of what an applicant had done in college or in their career before becoming a teacher, I look for someone who sets really ambitious goals and has a track record of achieving them. So they can speak to different experiences of, hey, I set this goal and here are all the things that I did to go achieve that goal. And then I got there. So that sort of like record of achievement. Another thing I'll mention, there's a number of different things, but one of the things that I love, that I always hire for, is I want someone who can learn from challenges and mistakes and failures and then do something different the next time. So one of my favorite questions that I always ask when I'm interviewing someone is, in the last like year or two, tell me about a time when someone gave you like really constructive feedback about your work or your performance, and like, who is that person and what was the feedback they gave you? And I want to hear someone share real feedback, like tough feedback that they got that maybe was hard to hear about their performance, but I want to hear them get that feedback, own it, and be like, yeah, that was good feedback. And then be able to say, like, really concretely, okay, here's what I did the next time to get to a different outcome. And I just feel like that, whatever the role is, whether you're a teacher or whether in your different position, like, you're going to face so many challenges, and, you're not going to be perfect. And I think the people who really perform in the long run are open to feedback, are open to coaching, and then can learn from mistakes and turn it into something, positive in the future.
Sure, sure. So thank you for sharing all those insights. So what led you to, from a teacher role, what led you to have an interest in policy in the Georgetown program? And then
Mm.
what was your experience in India?
Yeah. So I loved being a teacher. I mean, I really loved it. I loved working again with like kids, with other teachers, getting to build relationships with families, and I love that work. And also knowing that it was much sort of broader systemic challenges that were holding the education system back. I really wanted to explore policy to understand, like, what are those factors that influence whole school systems, not just like an individual teacher's classroom, but whole school systems. And then I was also just interested in what does it take and what does it look like to run a great organization, whether that's in education, in the public sector, or whether it's like a private sector company. Like what does great leadership look like, and how does that look like at the organizational level? And so that's what led me to Georgetown, and I did both an MBA and a public policy degree, and I loved that. And so, but then while I was at Georgetown, there's this amazing opportunity, and it was through the public policy program to study at IIM Ahmedabad, both with, if I'm remembering it correctly, it was a program specifically for executives in government
Yes.
in India who could study. So I got to take some classes with them, but then I also got to take classes, obviously, with you and other folks who are in the MBA program. And what an amazing experience that was. I loved it. I mean, from our time there, I got to make so many great friends. I just had such a blast. In particular, with students in the MBA program. I feel like that's where I made most of my friends. And so I really enjoyed it just socially. I remember being just like really blown away by some of the academic experiences and classes that I had. I feel like the students who were in the MBA program were so talented and so smart. And so I feel like just like through osmosis, I was just like learning a lot from everyone in classes. I'll never forget my favorite class. I don't know if you were in this class with me. It was with, oh my goodness, Professor, what was his name?
Anil Gupta?
Maheshwari.
Oh, Professor Sunil Maheshwari. No,
Yes.
I don't think I was there. Okay.
Okay.
Sunil
It was
Maheshwari.
about,
Yeah,
he was amazing. And the whole class was about like turning around companies that were failing or that were sort of like, on the verge of failing. And so we would, the homework was always to like read a case study about a leader who was turning around a company. And then, through sort of just like Socratic method in class, he would just, ask everyone questions about the case. And I always remember I was blown away by the knowledge and perspective that people were bringing, whether it related to, organizational strategy or marketing or whatever the different lens, like finance that people were bringing. But they were just such engaging conversations. I was always so nervous. I was like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't call on me because everyone else had such smart insights. But I loved those experiences. Like that was amazing. And then of course, during our 3 months there, we also had the opportunity to travel to so many different parts of India. And so that was just magical. And I just fell in love with India during my time there.
Okay, wonderful. So apart from, let's say, the academic immersion at IMA, did you also get an opportunity to look at some projects outside the, you can say, environment of IMA? Did you also get to visit some schools, etc., or was there such an opportunity?
It's so interesting that you asked that because no, when I was there, I didn't visit any schools or those opportunities didn't present themselves. Admittedly, I didn't seek them out either, but it is not something I got to experience while I was there.
Okay, great. So given that apart from being in US and India, you also had more than 2 year stint in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
How did it come up? What was your experience and any contrasting things you could observe between what you observed in US and in Mexico?
Yeah. So I lived in Mexico for 2 years in Guadalajara and was a teacher at the American School Foundation of Guadalajara. And what's so interesting is that, and I loved that experience. So it had been I think 15 to 20 years since I had been a teacher in Los Angeles, because I taught for 2 years, and then I went on to, do these other roles at Teach for America and study at Georgetown that I told you about. And so when I went to Mexico, I went back into the classroom, and it was an amazing opportunity to be a teacher again. And I taught the same thing that I had taught in Los Angeles. I taught 7th grade English language arts. And fortunately, it all came back to me. I was very nervous. I was like, am I going to be able to to do this again? But it came back to me. And so I loved working with students and other teachers there. What was different from my experience with Teach for America is it was a really different student population. So at the American School Foundation of Guadalajara, ASFG, it was a private school. So families, paid tuition for their students to attend. It wasn't a public school. And the school served really the most affluent students and families in Guadalajara. So it was very different from what I was used to. And I think one thing I learned, like, kids are kids, whether kids are coming from like a really affluent family or from a low income family, kids are kids. So it was the same on that front. But what really stood out to me was it was amazing and really special, the opportunities that students at this school in Guadalajara had. Everything from it was a great school academically. Lots of different academic enrichment experiences. For example, getting the opportunity to be part of like a really big debate experience, or there was an amazing theater program at the school. Students at the high school level got to go on week-long academic immersion experiences all around the world. And, just like a number of different opportunities. They had great classroom libraries. There was amazing, they had great access to technology on campus. And I think it was a reminder to me of, oh, wow, this is the kind of education that all kids should have access to. Like this is incredible. And it was just sort of a reminder of what the bar should be in my mind. That when I would go back to the United States, and I knew that, my focus would, back in the US, continue to be supporting students from low income backgrounds. It was a good reminder of that's the kind of access that I want my students back in the US to have. And so it was helpful just to to be immersed in that world for a bit in Mexico.
Agreed. So you talked about technology, access to technology. Now, if I can say it, we are in the age of AI.
Yes.
So of course, ChatGPT revolutionized in some way how content is generated, how people consume content, and even generate content. So with your perspective of, let's say, so much time spending with Teach for America, and also seeing a different perspective even in Mexico, where do you see our various intervention which such AI technologies could do, and what could be their potential benefits?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of benefits to how AI can really transform education and the way kids learn. I'll give you one example that we are, in my current role at Making Waves, that we are pursuing. First, I'll just give you a quick background on Making Waves. So we're a nonprofit, education nonprofit in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we support students from low-income backgrounds, students of color, to go to college and to graduate from college and to earn their college degree with zero debt and set up for career success. And as part of our model, we have a school, Making Waves Academy, that serves students all the way from 5th grade through 12th grade, so middle school and high school. We have about 1,100 students. And it's a really amazing school. And one of the strengths of our school is that almost all of our students, when they graduate high school, they go on to college. And I think we've learned a lot over the years around like what is great college advising and look like, so that students are on the path to access college opportunities. But the reality is, at most public schools in the United States, most schools don't even have one college advisor in their high school. So especially like in schools that are serving students from low income backgrounds. And so there's this huge gap of college advising in the United States. And so I think one of the roles that AI can play is in providing universal access to information and guidance about college. And so that's a strategy that we are pursuing right now. We've been developing a digital college and career center, and it is based on our learnings from our school, and like what are the pillars of our college advising model that have always been true at our school. And we have basically, we've created an AI powered tool, and we're teaching it what we've learned about college advising. And so students and families can access, just through texting on their phone, information about college. And it is both, 24/7, kids can ask questions, and, Chat GPT can, respond and answer questions, but we can also share out the information, our guidance tailored to, students who are 9th grade or 10th grade, 11th grade or 12th grade. Like, what do they need to be thinking about and doing to get on the path to college? And I think potentially, we're in the early stages of, developing that tool, and more and more students and families are starting to use it. But I think our aspiration is, we could close the college advising gap and get that kind of information to students and families at scale in a way that just isn't possible in our current model. So I think it's really exciting about the different ways that AI can play a role in education.
Oh, so that's a very beautiful, I would say, use case of yeah. I did not know that access to information about pursuing career options in colleges is would be that limited in US. When talking about even though US, I would say a dream place to go for a lot of
Yeah.
people, let's say from India, other places, and immigrants. I would say even if you take example of Elon Musk, they have built the country quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So talking from the policy front, US is going for the so-called presidential election. What do you see, since you have been in the ecosystem for quite a bit? What is the existing set of priorities which are being given from the state as far as education is concerned? What are the couple of areas where maybe more intervention could be done from the state perspective?
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on that?
I think one of the biggest things that I'm getting excited about these days is thinking about how to better connect the education system with the workforce. Like
Okay.
what are the fastest growing industries in, let's just take where I'm living right now, but in the San Francisco Bay Area, like what are the biggest industries, and how do we make sure that our education institutions, whether it's our high schools, our community colleges, which is our 2-year colleges, or our 4-year colleges, are preparing students to actually enter into the highest demand jobs and industries, so that they're set up for success in terms of their own careers and financial well-being, but also that we're setting our long-term economy up for success. And I think there's a real gap in that area right now. And so I think there's a role for like state government and policy to do some things differently there. So for example, what some of the challenges that I see uh, are when you go to college, you get obviously you get like a college degree. At the end of it, you take a set of courses, but your degree isn't necessarily you're not necessarily always demonstrating competency in certain skills that employers are looking for. And a lot of employers now are saying like, okay, the most important skills that matter to me as an employer is someone who can collaborate really effectively, like across teams, or can demonstrate strong like problem solving skills. And that's not necessarily what's being assessed like when you're taking college courses or even like in high school classes either. And so one of the big there's a big sort of movement in the United States right now around competency based and skill based assessment, or at like the college level or at the high school level, and really providing meaningful opportunities for students to engage in skill building, like engage in coursework or real world work experiences that build those skills. And maybe you don't need to go to college for 4 years to do it. Maybe you could develop that on a shorter timeline, but then it would prepare you for what employers are looking for. And so anyway, I think a lot of that change it's such a sort of system level issue that would need to be synced up. And so I think there's a role for public policy to kind of incentivize schools and universities and employers to make all the right moves that would like bring that into sync.
Sure, sure. Great. So thanks for those insights. I think in the context of India, I can talk about there is something called National Education Policy, the new one which came. It made more studies more in terms of modules. So what you have is,
Mm,
let's say, the vocational stream of education, as you were pointing out. One could maybe migrate from this stream to the regular stream, and people can move very freely. So I think that would be really, really good. That could increase mobility of students and also make them more employable at maybe early age itself, rather than maybe seeing light at the end of the tunnel where the
right.
academic program is.
No, I think I love that idea of modules and and students being able to like move at their own pace. Like maybe one student's going to take, I'm making this up, but like 2 months to like complete a module and pass and develop those skills. But maybe for another student, it's going to take 3 weeks. And
Yeah,
so that's great. Let it take 3 weeks. And so that student doesn't otherwise have to sit through 2 months of classes and get bored and disengaged. But how do you create learning experiences that keep kids engaged and getting the skills, to your point, more flexibly than what the setup is right now?
agreed, agreed. So we are at the end of the this live session. Given you a lot of international experiences and then bringing those learnings also in your work. If you have to give some advice to learners maybe who are moving outside their home country, what would be a couple of those advices in order to make most out of this international immersion? What would be your some of those advices which you could give?
Yeah. What would I say? I mean, I'm just such a relationship person. And so I feel like my first piece of advice is just to like really spend time like building relationships with people and building friendships. I feel like, again, thinking about my experience in Ahmedabad, I feel like that's how I got so much joy from making friends with classmates, and that's also how I got to learn about India too. Like I got to learn about people's families and their school experiences and just their perspectives on the country. And so I just got like such a window into the into India, and that and from that perspective, just because of the relationships that I made. And the same was true for when I was in Guadalajara too. I think about we became such good friends with our our neighbors who lived next to us, and they were amazing. And I feel like they kind of adopted us and always made sure that we
Okay.
were that we were okay in Guadalajara. But I made great friends with all the different teachers at my school, and again, like through those relationships is how I really got to um, learn and explore the culture and country. So anyway, that would be number one. What would be my what other advice would I have for folks doing cultural immersion? I definitely think, I guess there's probably different ways to do it, whether you're studying or working or like in a full-time job or volunteering. Like I've had the experience of simply just traveling, which I love. I mean, it's so much fun. And so, I definitely recommend simply traveling. But if you're working, studying, or volunteering in some capacity, I feel like there's this like lived experience and like maybe like a deeper perspective or window and learning that you have because you are engaged with other people, like in
Yeah, moving out of your so-called comfort zone.
yeah. So I would like recommend whatever the experience is, some kind of experience like that, where you kind of just get to like dig in and be working with people on something, whatever that is, in another country. I think that can be pretty meaningful.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks, Patrick, and those who attended this session. Let me link the live stream. You can be there, Patrick.
great.